The formal introduction for Jeff Borden. Jeff is the Chief Innovation Officer at St. Leo University. Equipped with an academic vision and strategy, Jeff is focused on transforming higher education. Dr. Borden's current role is creating a learning innovation incubator and promoting transformational and effective practices that are research-driven. This helps drive his innovative platform, Education 3.0. Jeff Borden.
Thank you. All right. I don't know how many of you can go back to your college times, but I was always that guy who left the party a little bit early. And I was also the person who ended up then hearing, oh, you should have hung out, man. There was amazing stuff that happened at the end. The bikini models from Hawaiian Tropic came, and Brad Pitt showed up, and all these sorts of things. I want to try to give you that experience so you can tell all the people who left that they missed out. Thanks very much. And I want to try to sum up what we did here over the last couple of days in a way that hopefully gives us a little bit more insight into how to do these things. This would be who I am electronically. I actually, when I was here 2 years ago, I showed the same thing, but I'm very proud to have added some stuff to it. St. Leo University as the Chief Innovation Officer. There's other pieces up here about what I do and who I am. But it's important that you know, I realize what I'm also not. I have studied essentially 3 things for 20 years that I've really tried to master. Communication. I have been up in front of audiences, I'm going to guess 20,000 hours or so. At the same time, education. I have taught hundreds of courses in the upper 700s of courses in education and communication. And then change. And when it comes to change, I think change and innovation actually tie together pretty interestingly as I've studied that. But it's not until you take all of these things that you start to see up here and you put it into some semblance of a pattern that you get any sense of who this guy is that's standing before you today. Well, what I want to do is I want to take some of the things that we have seen over the last 2 days and try to assemble a little bit of a pattern. See, I'm not just an educator, I'm not just a communicator, I'm not just a change agent. I really do consider myself to be a cultural learning innovation architect. And I think that we need more of those in order to make these things happen. The very first conversation with David Ricketts on Thursday, the kickoff to the conference, talked about a bunch of examples of innovation, the mac and cheese and where that came from. And there's plenty of examples you can go back and look at. We then heard from some people about how we can start to do this in terms of getting money and getting funding, but it was still a little ambiguous and a little ethereal. This morning, then, we hear about how we need to do things in a sustainable fashion. But how, if innovation is what's going to drive us to get there, how do we actually do that? I want to try today to sum up what we've done and give you a process. See, for 20 years, I really have just looked at all of the different elements that go into these things that create innovation. So you've got Kotter's change model. You've got some great books out there that start to talk about persuasion and how to persuade people by which to act. You've got these interesting books about creativity and entrepreneurialism, innovation. One of my favorites is by Jack Foster, How to Get Ideas. Then I take that stuff and I start to apply it to a learning context because that's my job and that's what we're trying to do is to change the way learning happens. I filter it through my own concept of Education 3.0. And what comes out on the other end is what I call learning innovation. So as we start talking about that, let me give you the process that I have really gleaned from all of these resources and hundreds more about how to try to innovate in a realistic, sort of recipe-driven fashion so that we can do it at scale, do it sustainably, and do it in a way that is replicable. I want to try to give you a blueprint for this. That blueprint, it has 10 steps. Now, that may sound like a lot. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. You'll get the deck when I'm done, so you can have access to it. And please contact me when we're finished. I don't want to take up more of your time than you were prepared for. But I want to try to walk through what these actually mean in a realistic way, and I'm going to apply it to what we're doing at St. Leo. So I'm going to start by talking about finding the problem. You actually have to assemble the problem. We heard several problems over the course of the last few days, and once you've got that problem, you actually then have a roadmap to start moving through the rest of the steps. In St. Leo's case, the problem is really around learning. Students either are or are not learning. There's a lot of controversy around learning today, what learning can be, should be, might be. But learning, if you were to just look at a definition of learning, you would see something like this. If you Googled it, you would find a definition that says learning is to acquire knowledge of or a skill in something by study, experience, or by being taught. Now, my problem with that definition is it's so transactional. And for those of you that have lived in the world for any length of time, you know just how transactional that is. In fact, I would like you to do something because we've been sitting here for a while. You're mentally fatigued. We need to actually move a little bit, okay? So here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you to find somebody near you who is wearing shoes that have laces. All right, and I'd like you to scoot over so that you're close to one of those people who has laces on their shoe. All right? Can you find somebody? Okay. Now, what I would like you to do very quickly is I would like for the person with the shoe with laces, I would like you to please untie one of those shoes and then tie it, and please explain to the people who are watching you what you're doing as you tie it. Okay? Do it as fast as you can. Just explain how to tie a shoe. Okay, how'd you do? Did you get him retied? It worked? Yeah, well done. All right, now, I have a question for you. I'd like you to do one more thing for me, please. Those of you with the shoes, I'd like you to untie it one more time and don't retie it for a second. Just untie it, okay? My problem is, what happened if you learned how to do that incorrectly? There's a TED Talk by this guy named Terry Moore who is going to suggest that most people in this room probably do not actually know how to best tie a shoe. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to play the video, and then I'll debrief it.
I'm used to thinking of the TED audience as a wonderful collection of some of the most effective, intelligent, intellectual, savvy, worldly, and innovative people in the world, and I think that's true. However, I also have reason to believe that many, if not most of you, are actually tying your shoes incorrectly. Now, I know that seems ludicrous. I know that seems ludicrous, and believe me, I lived the same sad life until about 3 years ago. And what happened to me was I bought what was for me a very expensive pair of shoes, but those shoes came with round nylon laces, and I couldn't keep them tied. So I went back to the store and said to the owner, I love the shoes, but I hate the laces. He took a look and said, oh, you're tying them wrong. Now, up until that moment, I would have thought that by age 50, one of the life skills that I had really nailed was tying my shoes. But not so. Let me demonstrate. This is the way that most of us were taught to tie our shoes. Now, as it turns out, thank you. Wait, there's more. As it turns out, there's a strong form and a weak form of this knot. And we were taught to tie the weak form, and here's how to tell. If you pull the strands at the base of the knot, you can see that the bow will orient itself down the long axis of the shoe. That's the weak form of the knot, but not to worry. If we start over and simply go the other direction around the bow, we get this, the strong form of the knot, and if you pull the cords under the knot, you will see that the bow orients itself along the transverse axis of the shoe. This is a stronger knot. It will come untied less often. It will let you down less, and not only that, it looks better.
You can pause the video.
We're going to do this one more time.
Okay, what I'd like you to do, please, I would like you to go back to the person who had that shoe. I would like you to now retie it in the way that you've just seen to tie a shoe so that you're actually tying it better. And I want you to explain what you're doing as you go. Go ahead. Weird? All right, shoe tires. How'd that feel? I heard weird over here. Weird? Awkward? Uncomfortable? Yeah? You already did it right? Well, fair enough. Now, here's what I'm going to, I would actually wager this with anybody in the room. Almost all of you, probably all of you, tomorrow when you wake up in the morning, despite knowing that there's a better way to tie a shoe, you're going to tie it the way you have always tied it. Because you learned that a long time ago, and just because you didn't learn the best way, you're willing to live with the risks, right? You're going to say, well, so I have to retie an untied shoe once a day, twice a day, which, by the way, you will do about a day and a half extra of tying a retied shoe over the course of your lifetime. But most people say, I can do this in my sleep. I've been doing it the way I've always done it this whole time. I'm not going to switch, right? See, learning is not transactional. Learning is about taking two competing elements and picking the best one over the other one. That's really difficult to do. But that's essentially the problem that we have in education, that I would argue that just about everybody has when it comes to learning anything, is convincing somebody that the two ways, there's a better way and that they should pick that better way. So whatever it is, you've got to define the real problem for people, not a problem that you have, by the way. It has to be a problem that they have. Most people are not willing to help with a problem that's not their problem. I think most of us would probably agree homelessness is a problem. If I were to ask you all for $100 today so as to fix homelessness, I'm imagining no one's going to give me any money. Because it's not your problem, that's a homeless person's problem. That's why philanthropy is so difficult to do. We have to find ways to make it the audience's problem. We have to make it the receiver's problem. And if we do that, then we can get to a much, much better place. Click on the next slide, just outside of the video. There you go. So at the same time, we have to figure out how to mold into some degree of urgency. So once the problem is determined, you've got to find a way to make the audience feel that there's actually a problem that needs urgently to be fixed. So if that's your company, if that's the outside world, if that's your constituents, whoever that is, they have to believe that there's a problem and that it's coming up pretty quickly. I would argue one of the biggest and hardest tasks that our speaker from right before is going to have when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to the use of coal, the use of gas, is that most people don't feel that it's an urgent problem. They should, but they don't. And when they don't feel the urgency, it's going to be very difficult to get them to adopt any kind of innovation that comes along. So there's got to be a sense of urgency. At St. Leo, when it comes to creating that sense of urgency, we talk about things like this. In 2010, IBM did this study where they asked CEOs, they said, what do you need from the people who you're about to employ? They said, look, more than anything else, we need entrepreneurialism, innovation, creativity. That's what's going to be the thing that gets us ahead in the future. More so than anything else that we've done before, that's what we need. People that are thinking critically and then employing that in creative ways. The problem? They can't find it most of the time. Coming out of my industry, the students that are graduating are not seen as creative, innovative, entrepreneurial people, and that's who business wants to hire. So that's a problem for us that we have to then say, it's an urgent problem because if we don't fix this, we're going to go away. And colleges and universities are going away every single week. Someone's closing their door somewhere and no longer offering degrees. So we had to talk about the urgency that goes behind this. We have to talk about the future of education and all the jobs that are coming that we're not preparing our students for. There are still universities all over the globe that are preparing students for jobs right out of an Agatha Christie novel. That's not helpful. That's not something that the students will use, and then they won't come to your university because they'll go someplace else where they can get these other kinds of degrees that are helpful. That's urgency that we had to build up with our faculty, with our administrative staff, with our enrollment counselors. We had to talk about this. It's the college scorecard. You can go to collegescorecard.gov, and you can put in any university you want. And it will tell you how much it costs to go there. It will tell you how many people actually graduate. And it will tell you what the average salary, starting salary of a person who graduates from there is. That's how the government has said, we're going to start measuring you. We have to be aware of this because in some ways we're better than some schools in the local area, and in other ways we're worse. That created some urgency for us. So we've got to find a way to create some urgency. After we do that, the third step in the process is to be as opportunistic as you can. Try to fix other stuff along the way if you possibly can. When Cortez landed on the New World, he burned his ships. As a result, his people were pretty motivated. They couldn't go home anyway. There's this famous city called Tianfu in China where they said, we want to test some things in terms of engineering. And so some of the engineers said, well, what if we took this opportunity to try some other things we wanted to do with regard to engineering, and we just built a city from scratch? Could we do that? Without having to rely on old infrastructure, without having to rely on old sewer systems and old pipes and old telephonic stuff, without having to worry about any of that. If we built it from new, what would it look like? And they're doing that. They're building a city from the ground up. At St. Leo, what we said was, look, we've got problems because we've got an LMS that's going away. Our learning management system was disappearing, and we had to pick a new one. So we took that opportunity to say, why don't we use that to fix some other stuff as well? We've got the Big Six is a study that came out from Purdue where they said there's 6 things that every graduate wants to have achieved by the time they graduate. And that makes them feel confident and secure going into their jobs. And at the same time, employers said, yes, if they do those 6 things, then we really want to hire those kinds of people. The problem was, of the 6 things at St. Leo, we were doing 2 of them. And we were only doing them for a small portion of the population. So we said, why can't we be opportunistic and try to get these 6 things in the way of every single graduate we have? And then, of course, there's also data. We wanted to use this opportunity to get better data, more data, things that were relevant and meaningful rather than just measuring what's easy. So we used this moment in time to be opportunistic. That is the next step in trying to figure out how you can deal with innovation. To try to show you what I'm talking about here, I want to play a game with you. There's a book that came out by a woman named Dweck. She talks about how students need a new mindset today. We have not done a good job preparing them for learning in their lives. We've sort of kicked that out of them through the K-12 experience, telling most kids that your learning is finite, which we now know to be ludicrous and ridiculous. You can learn anything you want to learn. But we tell kids, you're not a numbers person. You're not an art person. You're not a language person. And they believe us, as kids tend to do. So to make that point, I want to try to play a game with you for a sec. Here's the game. I'm going to take a dice. In fact, you can bring the dice. So there's not a special dice, just a regular dice. And I am going to ask you for $3 every time I roll that dice. I am then going to give you $1 for every dot on the top, every one of the pips that's showing. I'll give you $1, okay? I'm going to roll 100 rolls of this dice. My question to you is pretty simple. Should you play? Now, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to simply answer that with a person sitting near you. All right? Just put a guess on the record. Don't tell them why. Just tell them yes or no, I would play, or no, I would not play that particular game. Okay? Put a guess on the record with somebody near you. Go ahead. Okay. Now that you've got a guess on the record, there is a best answer, by the way. I'll get to that in just a second. Let me talk about this book, Mindset, by Dweck, for just a moment, because we wanted to be opportunistic about infusing mindset into our curriculum at St. Leo. And so we took this piece of information that we have, that she has written about how we need to treat learners so that they believe they can learn, and we started to infuse that. Now, you can really see this if you start looking at math around the country. This is one of my favorite examples. This is a math question that was given to a high school student, and the math question went something like this. There's this problem, and a boss asked somebody for an idea. This person thought he had a good idea, but his boss ended up firing him because his idea wasn't good. Please explain why he got fired. This student answered the question like this. It's funny. It's amusing. It's also a student who gave up. It's a student who said, I have no idea how to put together this particular calculation. I don't know how to put this equation into any sort of form that I can figure it out, so I'm going to just try to be cheeky. I'm going to try to be funny. That is a student who does not believe they can learn things like numbers. We have a problem with math in the United States. That's an actual headline. I hope you're seeing the irony. There you go. That's not good, is it? If you start looking at where we fall in terms of the ranking, not just of students, but of even parents, Our country is not particularly good at math. And when it comes to conversations around math, you start to ask parents, well, do you think it's important that your child know math? And their answer often is, nah, it's not that big a deal. Why? Because when they graduated, it wasn't that big a deal. You didn't need math to do basic job functions like you do today, but it's changed. We can actually start to look at it by state and see where we rank in the world order if we were to take our math results by state. It reminds me of this elephant that this young man put in the way of this test question. The object will continue to move, or will it continue to move after it comes to rest? And he says, of course not, there's an elephant in the way. Again, funny, but somebody who has no idea what they're doing with regard to that equation. It reminds me, this elephant that this person wrote reminds me of this elephant. You guys know the story of this elephant, right? That if you take an elephant and you chain it up for 3 days, that's all it takes, 3 days. You chain that elephant up, it will kick and stomp and snort, and it will trumpet, it will try to get out of that for 3 days. After the third day, you can take that chain off, you can replace it with yarn, and that elephant won't try to leave again because you have convinced it that it cannot escape. Just like our students are convinced they can't learn certain things. Instead, what Carol Dweck talks about in mindset is not a fixed mindset, but instead, she talks about this elephant with a growth mindset. The kind of elephant that believes it can go anywhere it wants to go, just like the learner that believes they can learn anything. If you want to see how this actually plays itself out in a way that you probably haven't thought of, tell the person sitting next to you, what is the greatest compliment that you can give to a learner? What is the nicest thing that you can say to them? Tell the person sitting next to you, quickly. Some of you are looking like it's a trick question. Maybe a little bit. I'll tell you what the answer should not have been. The answer should not have been, wow, are you smart? Because what Carol Dweck's findings were the people who are told they're smart don't ever want to look not smart. So they engage in behaviors that will allow them to continually look smart. They don't take risks because risks might make them not look smart. They don't necessarily do things that they might fail at because that makes them not look smart. So the growth mindset doesn't talk about being smart like the fixed mindset does. The fixed mindset says, hey, you're really smart. And somebody says, hey, great, I'm smart. I'm going to stand back here and let other people fail so I don't not look smart. Whereas the growth mindset says, I'm willing to take a risk. I'm willing to try. As good educators, we need to know how to involve the growth mindset for our students. We need to say to them, the effort was worth it, that the how much you tried mattered, that the input that you put in, maybe it didn't get the output that you were hoping for, but it still was important. The output's the output. The outcome's the outcome. That will take care of itself. But as educators, we've got to build people up to believe they can learn anything because that's what the growth mindset's all about. So in terms of learning, we wanted to be opportunistic in this moment when we had a big technological change with ed tech. We also wanted to infuse some things about learning research and brain science along the way as we went. The answer to this question, should you play my game? The reason I asked you this is because when this test has been given to various people, cab drivers, entrepreneurs, CEOs, a lot of people do very well on this particular test. Educators often don't. The average for education, at least for teachers in the K through 12 space that answered this correctly, was not even 40%. There is a correct answer, or at least there's a best answer, and that answer is, of course you should play this game. 2 out of 6 times you're going to lose. 1 out of 6 times you're going to tie. 3 out of 6 times you're going to win. You're never going to get odds like that in Vegas ever. Ever. Another way you can look at it, it's going to cost you $3 for every roll. You're going to get back $3.50. Take those odds, okay? That's your best answer. So as we start talking about the growth mindset, we've got to start getting people to believe they can learn things, which means we, of course, have to believe the same thing so that we can move along that continuum. The next step, this is the big one, by the way, for innovation, is making associations. If you've not read The Innovator's DNA, Jeff Dyer and group up in Harvard, it's a fantastic read, very important read for anyone who considers themselves innovative. There's really 2 aspects to this that are very important. The first one is around research. You've got to know a lot of things in order to tie them together. All right, so the first thing you've got to do is to be able to search. Now, I want to give you a little trick, little tip of the trade, okay? This is how you and I grew up searching. This is how we search. Remember, you go to the card catalog, you pull it through the card catalog, you go to the library, you find the thing, you go to the shelf, hopefully it's there. If not, you have to do interlibrary loan. It was awful. 1999, all that changed when Google comes along. Fantastic. What an amazing search engine. I still probably hear once a week, what did we do before Google? You know, it's incredible. It's all at our fingertips. You know, millennials and younger kids don't actually search this way. We do. But most millennials don't search this way at all. They search in a much better way. This is how they search. They start in one of two places. They start here with a Google image search because the image tells them so much more about whether the text on it is right. They have started to realize they can get back 10 million hits, but who cares when the first 100 of those 10 million hits are awful? Well, you can see that in the blink of an eye when you're looking at a picture rather than having to troll through text after text after text after text. So they will either start here or they will start here. They go to YouTube. Same reason. They get to see images. They get to hear people who are experts. There are often citations that are found from those videos right back to the places that they need. Now, once they're done with that, they'll do a quick cursory search of places like Pinterest or Twitter. They probably end up in a place like Wikipedia, which, like it or not, is a fantastic place to begin a search. Horrible place to end a search. It's a great place to begin. And then maybe they will get the holy grail of information. They'll get the infographic because that gives them pictures and text together, but it also leads them back to citations that they can then use for whatever kind of research that they're doing. It's a better way of starting a search. So we've got to be able to be good at searching, but we also have to have a ton of information. Now, this is where education has really tried to cram a ton of information into people over time. The problem is, what happens when that information is wrong? What happens when what we're teaching is incorrect? And so that's another area we had to be very, very aware of and cognizant of. Let me give you an example of that. If you have not read Lies My Teacher Told Me, you should check out the book. It talks about all these things that we teach students about history that are absolutely false or untrue. Some of my favorite chapters are on Columbus. This is what most college freshmen believe to be true about Christopher Columbus when they enter college. They believe that he was born in Genoa to poor Italian parents. They believe that he had such great navigational skills and understanding of the world not being flat that he was about the only one on the planet that realized that he could go around the globe and he could discover something. The Nita, the Pinta, the Santa Maria were just destroyed by weather. They had, storms galore, and that led to the sailors being really frustrated and almost mutinying several times. And then finally, he discovered America. Now, here's what I want to ask you. Of that list, how many of those things do you believe to be true? Again, tell the person sitting next to you, if it's one thing, three things, all of those things, how many of those things do you believe to be true? Go ahead and tell somebody sitting next to you. Put a guess on the record. So here's what we actually know to be true. None of those are correct. Not a one. He was likely not Italian. Why do we know that? Well, we've got letters from him in Italian that are written very poorly, whereas his Spanish and his Portuguese was flawless. He was very likely either Spanish or Portuguese. He was probably also a Jew, because he wouldn't have been given his own ship had he been Jewish, so he lied to people and told them he was Italian. Almost everybody at the time knew the world wasn't flat. Almost everyone. That was not uncommon. They'd known that actually for hundreds of years, so Christopher Columbus did not have tremendously good navigation skills. The ships were outfitted, and they were fantastic. They were big, they were really well outfitted, and there was not a single bit of weather. How do we know that? Because Columbus's own diary tells us that. We know it from his mouth, his words, right to us. We know that that's not true. The sailors weren't upset at all. They were looking for gold, just like he was looking for gold. They thought they were going to go get rich. There was no mutiny. And then finally, we know he discovered nothing. There were people here, a lot of people. There had been people here since the 1100s. We have found coins in Salt Lake City from different places, the Vikings, and from some places in the middle of Europe. We know that people had come and visited this place long before Columbus did. If we want to find catalysts for learning, and that's what we're really trying to do here, is to push the kinds of learning that we want so that it's knowledgeable, it's informed, but it also has hooks that people are interested in, let's create some conflict. And you know what? We don't even have to create it ourselves. Let's read to them from Columbus's own journal when he said this. He wrote a friend in 1500 about rewarding dignitaries and his lieutenants with native women by which to rape. It is very general, and there are plenty of dealers who go about looking for girls. Those from 9 to 10 are now in demand. He wrote that in a letter to his friends back in Spain. Why don't we talk about that? That's a catalyst for learning. If people want to say, no, that never happened, all right, prove it. Go do the research. Let's engage in the academic exercise. Let's talk about the critical thinking that goes around it, as well as important information that we need to know. That's a catalyst for learning. So we have to know things, but they have to be the right things. We have to know what is correct. Now, at the same time, the other important aspect of association is not just the knowledge of information, but it's actually the connection of that information out to other places. So one of my favorite quotes from Jack Foster in his book, How to Get an Idea, is, how do you get a great idea? Well, the answer, you get a lot of ideas. The more ideas you get, the better the chance one of those is going to be fantastic. So if we can get some really good ideas and start to build momentum on those ideas, some of them are going to bubble up to the top and be amazing. Some of the ways we can do that is by asking what other groups would do. There are companies who actually engage in this for 3 full days in their companies, big Fortune 500 companies. They say, we're going to put out on the table all these hats from other companies. Go wear one of those hats, go back to your table, answer this question as if you're a worker at that place. That is associative thinking. Trying to come at your problem from this angle. Somebody talked about Wicked the other day, about taking the concept of the Wizard of Oz and looking at it this way instead. That's really all that Wicked is. That's what associative thinking is. Finding solutions that wouldn't normally exist in your world from some other world and bringing them into your world. So let me ask you to do this for me. I want to ask you with the person sitting next to you, and you really answer this question, okay? Pick one of these companies right here. Just pick one. How would they measure student engagement? How would one of those companies measure whether or not a student is actually engaged in a classroom? I'll put the companies back up. Tell somebody sitting next to you how they might do that. Go ahead. Anybody want to share an answer? How about, yeah. Okay, so how many times a download and upload has taken place? That may be how Apple would choose to answer that question. Anybody else try a different one? Yeah. Good. So at Home Depot, whether they could actually produce something, create a product that would require math to be done, would require some other calculation to be done. Very good. These, yeah, one more. Go ahead. Good. How often, AT&T might say, how often is a person searching for something that has to do with the class versus how often are they texting their friend? Very good. That is what would blank do, which is associative thinking. This is essentially what we're getting at. I would encourage you, if you're in an innovative cycle, you should have what would blank do meetings, and they should last for a couple of hours. You should bring in some lunch, and you should just go with it and see what comes out of that. I think about, can we measure engagement from Nintendo's perspective? I've had this conversation with my friend Dr. Gordon Sanson in the audience before. I think Nintendo is absolutely poised to be able to do something remarkable with their with what they created for the Xbox. They can actually look and watch your face. They can tell you if you're engaged. Your pupils will dilate to a certain diameter. Your eyebrows will sag or not sag if you're engaged. Can you imagine if we had a couple of those cameras at the front of a classroom? We could tell you whether students are engaged or not. And we could be absolutely 100% correct, because the computer diagnosis of that is not going to be wrong. It's not a person's thought. I'm not going to say, well, they look tired, so I'm just going to give them that. No, a computer would say, no, they're not engaged, they are engaged. They're not engaged, they are engaged. Can we do that in our environment? As you start looking at being able to think associatively, you've got to start to think like other people think. You've got to know a lot about what other people do in terms of solutions, and then you've got to try to bring that to your party. That's how you make innovation really, really start to stick. We talked before about controlling the narrative. At St. Leo, we are talking about this educational technology ecosystem that we're building in conjunction with changing the learning, changing the methods, changing some of the brain science and things like that. And we're calling it the white whale. We call it the white whale because I say it's something that people have always asked to see, but no one's ever actually seen one. And we started calling it the white whale, and 2 weeks later, there was a white whale spotted off the coast of New Zealand. And there you go, that's it. So, I don't know. But it still works for our purposes, all right? In controlling the narrative, I talked to you yesterday in the panel about how when two people get on the same narrative, they actually couple in terms of the neurons that they're producing in their brain. Their brains fire in the same way at the same time. It's really quite remarkable. That story adds that context. It adds that connection to people. I want to see if I can give you an example of this with the following video from IKEA. IKEA created this video that really exemplifies the power of narrative in just a few seconds. I think you'll get what I'm talking about. Can you play this video, please?
Many of you feel bad for this lamp. That is because you're crazy. It has no feelings, and the new one is much better.
Did you feel badly for the lamp? How can you not feel badly for the lamp? That horrible, the rain coming down and the sappy music. I mean, you personified that lamp. Most people, when they watch that commercial, they've told me after, they said, I was waiting for someone to come along and scoop up the lamp and give the lamp a good home, right? That's kind of what you were hoping for. That conflict that was created is something you're connecting to. That's the power of narrative. That's why you have to create a narrative. We created the white whale so people could start talking about the white whale, not because the white whale matters, but because it gives you something that people get, okay, it's unattainable, but we're going to try to make it attainable, we're going to go for it, got it. That's what we're trying to do. Can you please click on to the next slide? There you go. Here's how we started to do that when we first started talking about this at St. Leo. We said, look, what would you do if you're going to build a home theater today? Well, if you had to rely on old infrastructure, then you've got to make sure that your home theater will handle VCR tapes, DVDs, Blu-rays, as well as Amazon, as well as all that you've got. You're going to have this monster cabinet with all this stuff in it, right? If you really want to create something, you're going to have so much equipment today so you can handle all the old stuff. But we said, wait a minute, what if we didn't want to build it based on old stuff? What if we were starting from scratch today? Wouldn't our home entertainment system look something like this? With a little box that was Apple TV or a Roku or a Chromecast, and then maybe a soundbar? Done. Elegant, simple, more powerful. We're trying to build that kind of ecosystem today. Something that is simple and powerful without having to worry about all the old stuff that we would have had to normally build on. We're building it new. We're building the stuff that matters based on what we know today. That's our narrative. That's our story. And that's the story we're starting to hear people say back to us, so we know that it's starting to work. You've got to start controlling your narrative. Now, along the way, you're going to fail. It is important that you know it, that you plan for it, and that you even embrace it. Without failure, innovation is almost impossible. That's, again, from Innovator's Dilemma. Jeff Dyer talks about how if you don't have any failure, you're probably not innovating at all. Failure is just one of those things that happens. Be prepared for it. Know how to close the loop and move on. At St. Leo, we were planning to have, in this last year, a TEDx talk. We were turned down by TEDx. Now, if you want to talk about this after, I'll tell you all the reasons that I think that TEDx is quite foolish for the reasons they gave us. They said that they wanted all local speakers. They didn't want any powerful speakers or any good known speakers. They wanted the event to essentially not be as great as it could be, which just blew us away. But fair enough. We're going to go back to the drawing board and try again. But we failed. We didn't get there. We had to decide if we're going to try again or if we're going to cut bait and try something else. We are going to try again, but we had to be prepared for those failures. You will fail. You've got to be okay with that. If not, innovation is just not going to happen. After that, you've got to start getting ready for your measurement. How do you measure what you're going to measure? Now, in education, you know what we measure. We've measured this stuff for years. You measure grade and you measure time. Maybe you evaluate your students. You send out a survey at the end of the class and see what people think. But that's it. We measure what's easy. Why don't we measure grit? If you look at the University of Pennsylvania and all that they've talked about with the power of grit and people's desire to keep moving forward when they feel like they can't go on, that's a better indicator and a better marker of whether they will be successful. Why don't we measure that? Why aren't we measuring their motivation? Whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, why aren't we starting to look at what actually engages these students in a motivational capacity? Why aren't we measuring what they search for? We could. Or even better, why don't we measure what they write down? Why don't we measure that? Because if you do a word cloud at the end of a class that shows all the words that were written down by your students, you're going to get a pretty decent idea as to whether or not you got the message across in the way you wanted to or not. Why don't we measure that? This guy named David Ogilvy, I bet many of you know his name. He was the marketing guru, sort of the godfather of marketing. He was a Brit. He died just last year. He took survey after survey after survey of people for decades. It was his whole job. His whole mission in life was based around surveys so that he could get you exactly what you needed when you needed it. And then he came out with this interesting quote, and this quote that said, "People don't think how they feel, they don't say what they think, and they don't do what they say." He basically undermined his entire existence as a marketer. He said, we've been taking surveys for 60 years, and it was all for crap. That's essentially what he said. And here's why he said it. He was asked about the results of this study that was done about commercials. Now, I have a quick question for you. This is not a trick question. I do want an answer. Of the commercial set, of the 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7 commercials that happen in a TV show, which one do advertisers get charged the most for? Which one of those commercials? Does anybody know? The beginning? Any other thoughts? The last one? Those are the 2 answers. So you get charged the most for the first commercial, and you get charged the second most for the commercial right before you come back to your show. All right? It has been that way for almost 70 years. We've been charging people that. Here's the problem. David Ogilvy was speaking to that when someone said to him, did you see the study that was done in the scientific lab with the fMRI machine where they put people, they hooked them up to these machines that could read what their brain's doing, and he said, no, tell me about it. So they told him. They said, we were watching how they watch TV, whatever show, drama, sitcom, didn't matter. We wanted to see how they watched it. And we noticed that as soon as the commercial started, their brain activity kicked in. But you know what really lit up the most with that first commercial? Their anger and pain center. We have been charging people for 70 years for the commercial that pisses them off. That's what we've been charging people for. This is the worst possible spot. You should pay us more money for it. Which, by the way, if any of you are advertising on local TV, make sure that you're not getting the first spot because you're just taking away people's entertainment. That's not what people want. So in that regard, surveys just don't work. At the same time, we don't necessarily report correctly. This great study was done where these parents were told this information. They said this is how much goes into the calories of a typical breakfast. They were then asked to make breakfast for their child. Okay? So they made breakfast for their kid. After they were done, they were asked to report how many calories they had actually just given their child. That was what they reported. How much do you suppose they actually gave their kid? Has anybody seen it? Got a guess? How many calories did they feed their children? In reality. 1,000? 1355. Why? Because you don't give somebody a cup of orange juice, you give them a glass of orange juice. You don't give them a cup of cereal, you give them a bowl of cereal. People don't know how to do that kind of calculation in their head, so they report incorrectly. Surveys don't lead us down the road to the best stuff. Wouldn't you like to know as employers how a student was in terms of their collaborative nature? Don't you wish you could ask that during an interview and get a legitimate answer? At St. Leo, we are trying to create a system that will allow for a legitimate answer. We are using tools that actually allow you to take that interview for the candidate and to see over time how they have gotten better at being a team member. Can they, when they get that team project, do they undermine it? Do they walk away? Do they lead it? What behavior do they take? We want to be able to put that on a transcript, not just a grade, because a grade's meaningless. And most people don't even look at those. The third of the companies that do look at transcripts, all that they want to know is that you actually graduated, because they know that the A's, the B's, the C's, they mean nothing. This means something. It tells you what kind of person you were with. How do they take notes? Well, you can show that to a potential employer. How do they connect to other people? You could show that to a potential employer. That's the kind of system that we're trying to build. That's why we brought, for those of you that met Dr. Sanson here from Australia a couple of years ago, was to bring this technology he had built down at Monash University here to St. Leo University. That's why we're doing it. Now, after that's done, one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever read is from Jack Foster in How to Get an Idea. He says, look, after that, you've got to just take a little bit of time away. You got to relax. If you've never seen it before, you can actually put yourself into a place of creativity. Did you know that? You can actually do this during relaxation. You need to have an environment where you've got more than 55 decibels that are in the environment, but less than 85 decibels in the environment. You actually have to create an environment that looks something like this, like a coffee shop. There's a reason novelists go there to do their writing. All right, and if you can't do that at your house, if you're just trying to ramp up your creativity, turn on the app Coffeetivity, and you can simulate the sounds of a coffee shop. Okay, and you can put it right at 76 decibels, and you can put yourself into what's called abstract cognition. So back away from the problem, just relax, think about something else, try to be creative in some other fashion, or better yet, solve another problem. Go do some reading. You want to find a good place to read? Check out my blog. No, you don't have to do that. But if you do, you'll find all these great resources that are. But aside from that, solve other problems. Fix something else. Divert your attention just for a little bit of time. Go over here, and what some of the gurus around this in terms of creativity will say is suddenly it'll pop into your head. You'll go, oh, I should try that. Again, associative thinking starts to come back. And that gets us to our very last step. Take action. Do something. Do it. Implement it. Don't wait for perfect. All right? Perfect is the enemy of good. Just be good. Try to create a good solution. Get there. These streams that you see right here are the 8 things I do every single day at St. Leo. I am bringing together solutions on 8 different fronts to try to get to all the things that I've talked about with you today. It's a lot of work, but I'm doing all the time. Some work, some don't. I fail on occasion, a lot of them succeed. I'm doing. Do something. We are trying to find meaningful behaviors by which to measure. Not just grade, not just time, not just survey, but we want to find activity, behavior, other things around outcome that actually are measurable. At the same time, we have changed our course development process so that it's much more engaging, so that it's much more dynamic, so that it's much more problem-based, much more constructivistic, because we know that works. So we're influencing all the stuff we're doing with that at the same time. Sarah and Stan came up and watched our debate. We brought together 9 classes from 7 disciplines in a mock debate. They acted like they were going to be president of the United States. NPR covered it. Fox News covered it. We brought some different people together. All these classes put this on. Our security students, they actually made sure that the environment was safe. Our communication students interviewed the candidates. Our psychology students analyzed the candidates. We had a legitimate vote, and somebody became the president just last November at St. Leo University, based on their campaign and their debate. We just act over and over and over again. When you do that, you have a recipe or a formula for how to sustainably create innovation and keep it moving forward. That is what I would recommend after leaving here and hearing all of these important ideas. You want to fix them? Put this into action, and you'll start to fix them one at a time as we go. Thank you so much. Enjoy.